So I want to talk about kind of like the fundamental tragedy of politics, or of what happens to people that decide to go into politics. Good people that go in hoping to make a difference, who then come out as politicians. And we all know how politicians are, and people don't really like them, but people don't remember politicians are people too. And so what happened to these people who were usually like good people, and now they're politicians, they're not people anymore. Politicians are still people, but how does it happen? And so fundamentally, I think people understand what the process is. People know how politicians go corrupt, but I'll just give my synopsis briefly, and then maybe I'll give a couple examples here of it in real life. But I mean, fundamentally, like, people understand, it's like, okay, let's say you have a idealistic person that wants to make a difference and help better the world because they see some social ills, so they decide to get into politics. At the beginning, or at the inception, there's going to be a choice to be made, which is, is your goal from here to get elected, to get to power? Because what good is going into politics if you can't get to power to be in the position to make the decision to influence things and change things? So, like, if your goal is to get elected, there's going to be this road. We can go down this road, and we'll talk about it in a second. Or is your kind of guiding North Star going to be to speak your truth and to stay steadfast to your values, and then eventually have faith that that will eventually get you to the elected position? These are like two divergent paths, and in reality there's like slight deviations, as in like you can still be true to yourself, but not like you can, you know, say things that are going to be actively undermine your campaign. But more or less, these are the two paths that people can choose. And when people choose this path, I wouldn't even say 9 times out of 10, I would say like 99 times out of 100, or almost every single time, they do not get to power. Or certainly they don't get to the highest levels of power, because the higher up the power, the more kind of feedback and countervailing forces there are to undermine that ascent, and the harder it's going to be. I mean, people, local, like school board or local city council or whatever, I mean, there's still going to be resistance, but it's more likely that you could get elected on this path. But if you are to get elected by speaking truth to power and holding on to principles and taking on institutions, it's only going to be insofar as there's a groundswell of popular support that's actually behind you, like grassroots activists knocking on doors, people within the community actually counteracting these other forces which are against you. Where are these other forces coming from? Well, they're supporting politicians whose primary goal is to get to power. And people who decide to go on this path, they're like, okay, I need to get to power. The way to do that is I need to make sure, like 9 times out, actually I think like 19 out of 20, like 95% of congressional races roughly, the winner has the most campaign dollars. So that's like super, super highly correlated. And the campaign dollars don't come from small dollars donations, especially in local races. Almost always they come from special interests and super PACs and corporations and local business leaders and people who have, you know, 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 digits to donate to a political campaign or to a PAC. Well, these constituencies are kind of the powers that be. And so, I mean, they're not all the powers that be, so you can kind of say some things sometimes, but you can't really alienate these constituencies or you'll lose your access to power. And then there are other ones also, like the local Democratic Party or other elected officials within the state, or, you know, the editorial boards of large newspapers within the state who have ties to all these different power brokers as well. And so if your goal is to get to power, these are the people that you need to placate, and that significantly limits the amount of truth that you're able to speak. And so right from the get-go, the idealist that gets to power going this way has already kind of let go of a lot of their principles or made a lot of compromises in order to achieve that, which they might be able to justify in their heads and like, okay, I'll bite my tongue for now during the campaign, but once I get there, you'll just see what I do. But that's kind of a problem. And when they do get to be elected, that's going to they're pretty much too far gone. Once you've made that decision out the gates, you're not going to, there's almost nobody that I can think of that's an actual good politician that immediately accommodate themselves to the system. Now this person, like I said, they're usually not going to get elected. Once in a while they are elected, and when they are, that's interesting because the pressures don't stop. They actually, like, once you get into the halls of Congress, what you are is surrounded by other people who made this decision and their allies and their lobbyists and campaign donors and other very powerful people in Washington, D.C., and so they're going to be surrounding you all the time. Now they're your coworkers. Now they're your colleagues and friends. Now they're talking to you all the time about your next campaign, which you still have to run. And there's going to be somebody from this lane taking you on, especially if you're doing things to undermine those special interests against them. They're going to be especially motivated to get you out of office. So now your interests are not only influenced by your social circle, which are people from this lane who've made the compromises, but also like just political interests, like, okay, I'm going to be thrown out of office immediately here, and often are if they stay true to their principles. This is what happens to good politicians if they don't start making some compromises. And so this is what happens. Okay, so what does that look like in practice? Well, I think you've probably seen for the thumbnail, I think what I'm going to do is, you already know it because I already put it up, but I'm going to put, we'll have AOC, and then we'll go to Elizabeth Warren, and then we'll move to Nancy Pelosi, and then we'll go to Kristen Sinema, and then maybe we'll put a picture of Cruella de Vil, and it'll go like this. It'll be like, how good politicians get corrupted. And maybe you thought that that was nice, or maybe you thought that it was offensive because you like some of those politicians. And I kind of like two of them also still. And especially AOC and Warren, I actually liked a lot just a few years ago. But I think that the reason I put them there is because I think it's a good they're good case studies, as are actually Nancy Pelosi and Kristen Sinema as well, because they're all kind of illustrative of people who at least originally said things and indicated that they got into politics for the right reasons, but have clearly, by their actions, been significantly co-opted from those original principles towards the stereotypical politician. Although there is a spectrum, that's why I made it like this. So this would be the beginning of kind of going in that direction. Then you get to be Elizabeth Warren. There's Nancy Pelosi. There's Kristen Sinema. Then Cruella de Vil. I don't know about Cruella de Vil. They don't necessarily have to skin puppies, but that would be the next step. And it's not. If I had to choose between Cruella de Vil or Kristen Sinema right now, I would have to think about it. And so what are those examples? And so with AOC, she's still, in my opinion, one of the best members of Congress, which admittedly is not a very high bar, unfortunately, but she's done a lot of good things. But it's just pretty clear, just by looking at her actions, especially of recent, that she is not the same person, and she does not do the same type of things that she did even 2.5 years ago when she was elected, which was just not very long ago. And it doesn't bode well for what she might be doing in 20 years if this trajectory continues. And so as I'm recording this, she just switched her vote from a no vote on funding Israel's Iron Dome system, an extra $1 billion, Israel being... I won't go into Israel too much, but they're doing a lot of super illegal things to millions of people in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Israel proper even, extremely discriminatory Jewish supremacist laws. That's human rights organizations like HRW and B'Tselem have actually said that explicitly of recent. The whole world is trying to, not the whole world, but there's significant efforts to try to curtail that, but it's not ever done because the U.S. is propping them up diplomatically, but more importantly, militarily, with billions of dollars each year. And this is an extra $1 billion, which they're trying to get for their Iron Dome system, which you'd think would be an easy vote for AOC, who's actually said good things, or actually correct things, negative things about Israel, which is correct, previously. But what she just did is she switched her vote at the last minute from no, which would have been great, to present, which is especially ironic because she went out of her way just like 8 or 10 months ago to criticize Tulsi Gabbard, maybe justifiably, for voting present on the first of Trump's impeachment. She's like, this is ridiculous. Like, you can vote yes, you can vote no, but what you voting present for? You're in Congress. And I'm like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. But now she just voted present. And the reason that she did it, obviously, and anybody that's arguing this is like, you're not acting rationally. You're viewing politics as a spectator sport, cheering for your team. You're on Team AOC because you like how she makes you feel. I liked her too. I still do like her, kind of, but you have to look objectively. The reason she's doing it is because for her political career, it's clear, it's obvious that all the pressures internally from the Democratic Party are to not vote against that, so to vote present or to vote yes. And then also, if she has ambitions, which she clearly does, either for governor or more likely for senator, or even potentially for president eventually, you do not want to be in New York City or running for office and then have, be viewed as voting against the interests of Israel. There are a lot of large donors, Israel supporters in New York City. And so that's just totally, and then she cried about it and then got a little bit of sympathy for that, which I'm like, okay, I understand you're a person, you have emotions, but you shouldn't be the one crying. You just voted like billions of dollars of military aid, which are probably going to directly lead into people dying. So maybe you're not the victim here. So maybe stop playing the victim when you're one of the most powerful politicians in the world. And it should be an extremely easy vote. And it's especially ironic because her criticism of Gabbard's present vote, which was just like less than a year ago, this is the second time that she's done this in a matter of months. I think like 3 or 4 months ago, there was a vote on funding the Capitol Police an extra $2 billion after the January 6th incident. Not to go towards like bonuses for the police, but like for like extra surveillance capacities and equipment and what have you. Just an extra $2 billion to the police. And she voted present on that, and this was a vote which passed by 1 vote, which never happens in Congress. So she effectively decided that this extra $2 billion would go to the mass surveilling Capitol Police when she actually had a vote that would have decided that. So she's like, yes, we're going to give it. She could have decided. She decided to fund the police extra, not just any police, the extra surveilling Capitol Police, which are not subject to FOIA requests, which is one of the reasons that they Freedom of Information Act requests, usually that's public officials are, not the Capitol Police in DC, which is one of the reasons that they try to put extra money towards it, so that the kind of like the deep state has more surveillance powers over the populace. And she was one of the ones that was the anti-police, defund the police people. So now she's literally, when she has the chance, so when it doesn't matter at all, she'll say, defund the police, and she'll say it at protests in the middle of nowhere, or in the middle of New York City. But when she actually has the opportunity to defund the police, she votes to fund them an extra $2 billion. Now, I personally, I'm not anti-defund the police. I'm definitely not. I don't think it's a super great slogan either, because, well, for a bunch of different reasons. I wouldn't be chanting defund the police if I was AOC. I would be more nuanced about it. Maybe reform the police, whatever it is. She's decided to be defund the police, and then instead what she did was funded the police an extra $2 billion when she had the chance to not. The reason she did that is because all the Democratic Party was pushing towards it, and there was a bunch of political interest for her in the calculus for her political career. It was like, okay, I might say to fund the police, but I need to actually, fund them in this instance to the tune of billions of dollars. And so this is the trajectory. And then with Elizabeth Warren, I won't go into too much, but she got into politics explicitly to stand up to the credit card agencies, and she was kind of doing it righteously for the bankruptcy bill, and she was opposing it. And when she did that, like, her main opposition as senator was Joe Biden, and then she runs for president, and she can't really mumble a mumbling word about him being her principal reason that she got into politics was to stave off the credit card industry, which had totally bought Joe Biden because they're extremely prominent in Delaware. And she confronted him back in the day, but wouldn't mention it when she's running for president. And then by the end of the campaign is staying in extra long to make sure that Biden wins every state in Super Tuesday and splits all the votes and she splits all the votes with Bernie, even though she has no chance of winning at all. And then we know what she did. And so at this point, she's more or less almost like all of the other Democrats in the Senate, which is kind of a shame. And you can go down the line. Pelosi even, right now she's the main person standing in the way of single-payer health care. She won't let it come up for a vote. She's extremely bought and co-opted by the healthcare industry. But there's videos of her back in the 90s being like, oh yeah, we need to absolutely move towards universal single-payer health insurance, blah, blah. And now she's total opposite. And you can go down the line for a bunch of different things with her. She's worth $100-something million. You don't get that on a public servant salary. She's doing insider trading all the time, including a couple months ago. She is the machine. And then Kristen Sinema, she was a member of the Green Party. She was in 2001, she was an anti-war activist for the Green Party. And then there's videos of her that David Sirotas put up. I think she used to work for his nonprofit, that she's talking about, it's oh yeah, I just want to stand up for regular people. Well, now she's the one that's the most corrupt Democrat in maybe the entire Senate, along with Manchin. And she's literally standing in the way of every single good proposal that even the Pelosi's and the Warrens and obviously the AOC's are all supporting with this reconciliation bill, which by the time I publish it might have passed or not passed. But she's literally the worst. And then you get Cruella de Vil, and she's skinning puppies. And so that's kind of how it happens. And it's pure political kind of pragmatism. And it's like, for anybody that does, and I've told this to people who do want to run for office, but it's like, if you run for office and actually make a difference, you have to resolve. I mean, there are like little compromises you can make about like not saying something stupid, put your foot in your mouth, or alienating a constituency or whatever it is. But fundamentally, if you want to run for office and like actually make a difference, you have to like expect to lose. You kind of have to expect to lose unless there's like actual democratic mobilization and grassroots support, which is out of your hands. If you like want to have it all within your power, yeah, you can do that, but you have to play ball the way it's been played before. And then if you do that, the very best you can do is hope to tinker around the edges and make little differences here and there. But fundamentally, you are the problem, as with those other politicians that I just named. And so hopefully that was a little bit helpful for people. I'm not anti-AOC or anti-Warren or anything, but I think people need to look at what happens rationally, and then also have like a perspective of politics which isn't hyper-focused on the individual. Whether that's like the Republicans do that all the time with people that I don't like, and obviously there's a cult of personality around Trump, but the Democrats will do it too with people that it becomes like a sporting event. You root for your favorite people, and I think you just need to look at it rationally, and then also with clear eyes if you are ever wanting to run yourself. So